Hey guys, it's Liv and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to be open about something that I've been keeping private for quite some time, and by the time this video comes out it will be about 2 years since the start of this journey, and I just wanted to take a step towards being more open and honest and share my experience, because hopefully my experience can help others who are dealing with the same thing. Possibly my experience can educate others or just make others feel like they're not alone in this, because that's kind of how I felt during, even though I had great people around me helping me, and even though I had great people around me and helping me through this, sometimes when others are not going through the same thing, it kind of makes you feel like when you're going through it that you're alone. So I didn't want anyone else to feel like that, and I wanted to share my journey with you guys. Before I get started, I want to thank everybody who has been there since day one and helping me through this entire process, who has come to my doctor's appointments, who've been by my side helping me get out of bed when I needed it the most, and just being there. You know, that is more than I could ask for, and thank you is never going to be enough, but thank you. So I decided 2 years ago when I started my journey that I wanted to keep this private, and I didn't want to share with anybody, because naturally I'm a very private person. I don't like to, display my business and put my business out there, but I think I also didn't want to feel vulnerable and seem weak. But I think that's an old mindset for myself and something that I need to grow out of. Just because you're going through something doesn't necessarily make you weak. I also didn't want anybody to feel bad for me, and I felt like my body was, and I still do at times, was failing me, and that's something that's very difficult to talk about and to be open about and just to share with others. During this whole thing, I didn't necessarily want to be treated differently. I wanted everything to remain the same, although a lot of things have changed. I wanted to keep feeling like the person that I was before this whole thing, but in all honesty, a lot of things have changed and I've grown, but I've grown for the better. So about 2 years ago, I found out that I had cancer, which is strange to say even today. Every time I say it, it just feels unnatural coming out of my mouth to say that, but that's the situation. And 2 years ago I was diagnosed with papillary thyroid cancer and Hashimoto's disease, which were two things that prior to that day never crossed my mind, that would be a situation for me, or that'd be something that I would have to endure or deal with the rest of my life. On top of being diagnosed during this time, I was going through a lot. My family was going through a lot. We just found out my grandfather was ill in July of that year, and from July until about September we weren't quite sure what was going on with him. We thought maybe it was Alzheimer's or something was going on with his memory, and we didn't really know what was going on. And we spent a lot of time driving after work every day to spend time with him, or every weekend to spend time with him, because we didn't quite know what was going on. And our family is very close, just like many families. So when one person is not feeling their best or not acting normal, you want to find out what's going on and you want to be there for them. So a lot of my days during that time were spent with him and with my family, and a lot of things that I was doing I canceled, and I didn't, I stopped going to school. After the semester ended, I kind of took some time for myself and to be with my family. I was still working, of course, but a lot of times I had to work remote because I needed to be there for my family, and we were all, together and supporting each other. But during this time I made the decision for my birthday to go and at least do something for myself, So I went to New York with my friends, and this was in the first couple of days of September. And on my birthday, I remember being in Times Square before we were about to take our flight home to Florida. And while we're walking around Times Square, I get a call from my mom, and she says, I get a call from my mom, and it was, I'll never forget that conversation. She said that when you land, your brother's gonna come pick you up from the airport in Miami. he's gonna take you home, you're gonna get clothes, get all of your work stuff, because we need you to come back down to Miami, and we're gonna be spending some time in the hospital because your grandfather is sicker than we thought. And that's exactly what I did. At that point, I didn't even want to be in New York anymore. I felt guilty for not being there in the first place, which is, not fair for me to feel like that, but that's the truth. I felt guilty, like I shouldn't have left, like I could have been there and done something, which is not true. This is just how life is. And I got back from New York and I got my stuff just as I was supposed to. I drove down to Miami with my brother, and I got to the hospital, and our family is quite big, and there were so many of us in the waiting room. I walked in and everybody was just talking, and I felt like I walked in and they were waiting for me to get there, and everybody felt bad that I was spending the rest of my birthday in the hospital, but at that point it didn't even matter. It wasn't about me. It was about something bigger than me. And that day we found out that my grandfather had brain cancer and he was terminally ill. And the weeks that followed, we had to make decisions for him to make sure that he was going to live the rest of his life the best that he could. And it was a very difficult time for everybody, as you can imagine. And knowing that my grandfather at the time, I knew that he had cancer, and not knowing about myself at that time, all my focus was on him. And then our focus also was directed at, my cousin, who at the time had been sick for many years, who also had cancer, and our focus was on her and on him and trying to make sure that they were okay. And, those two people were some of the most amazing people that I knew. My grandfather was the best man that I knew. And my cousin, she was such a beautiful soul inside and out, and it was crazy to think that my grandfather, who was just a few years prior building his own bathroom and doing all this crazy stuff, to now spending his days in the hospital and at home and in bed, and not knowing what was going on, and us trying to be there for him. And my cousin, who's just would walk in the room and was like the light of the room, to now spending her days in the hospital. It was just crazy. In September of that year, we lost my cousin, which was so difficult. I cannot even put words to that situation. So the next month we're in Miami again, at my grandfather's home after his surgery, and we're helping him and just doing what we can to be there for him, to make sure that he recovers and feels comfortable, and we're giving him all the support that he needs. And while we're there, I was talking to my mom, and I think I had a moment to just breathe and talk to her, because I think this whole time we've been moving so quickly and we didn't have a chance to sit down and talk. And I said, lately I've been feeling kind of weird. My mom was like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, my neck's been kind of hurting, and also when I swallow, it's like, feels like maybe I have acid reflux or something. She said, next time when we get back home, just make an appointment and go see your doctor, just make sure everything's okay. And at that time, I didn't have an ENT, but I decided to find one local in our area, and I made an appointment to see him. And when I got to the office, everything was fine. It was a great office. The visit, everybody seemed nice, and I get in there and I'm talking to him, and I said, hi, I'm here because I think I might have acid reflux, and I just explained my symptoms. And I said, also have like a little bit of a lump on the side of my neck that I wanted you to check out. And he took a quick second, not even any more than what I can describe as a glance, and said, oh, on your neck, that's just a lymph node. It's just enlarged. You probably were sick recently, but I'll do a test to see if you have acid reflux. And he was able to see that I was suffering from acid reflux. And while I was there, I started to feel a little bit, uneasy with everything that's been going on. And knowing my family history, that my mom had half of her thyroid removed due to a goiter, and her aunt had her whole thyroid removed due to a goiter as well. I wanted to just make sure everything's okay. So, being that it runs in my family, I said, hey, would you mind, this is my family history. Would you mind allowing me to do some sort of test to make sure my thyroid's okay? And he's like, no, it's fine. And to me, that answer wasn't good enough. When someone or a patient is electing into running a test, it's not down to the doctor, even if you think it's not necessary. It's not down to the doctor to make the decision and tell them no. If it's going to put their mind at ease, it's, in my opinion, it's up to the patient to make that decision whether or not they want to do it, depending on what kind of test it is. And he just said no. And knowing what I know, being a woman that's biracial, I know that in many instances women who are of color don't get taken seriously in medical facilities. And this is exactly what that was. I wasn't being taken seriously. He barely even looked at my neck when I first mentioned the lump, so I didn't feel like he was hearing me. So I said, well, actually I would really like to, get an ultrasound or something. Is that what you would typically do? And he said, yeah, I would typically do an ultrasound. And I said, okay, well, would you mind doing an ultrasound for me? And he said, no, you don't need it, you're fine. And at that point, it had been the second time I'm asking. I'm already under a lot of stress, and I'm not normally one to get upset, but I did get upset a little bit. And I said, I'm not going to leave this office until you give me a prescription to get an ultrasound on my thyroid. I know my history, and I know that many times people of color, and mainly women, are not taken seriously. And this is not something I said to him, but I know that I'm not going to be someone who experiences that. I'm going to be my own advocate, and I'm going to push for something that I feel I need to do. And reluctantly, he wrote me a script to get an ultrasound, and the next day I went just to make sure. And he said, nothing's going to come back. I'll probably call you with your results or have you come in or something when it comes back. And I said, okay, that's fine. At this point, I'm just ready to get the results over with, and I'm thinking, okay, everything's going to be fine, but I just want to make sure. And I do the ultrasound. I have them check out the lump on my neck. They don't really see anything, but the tech is just scanning my whole thyroid and the surrounding areas, and she takes the photos she needs and whatever, and then I get a call from the ENT's doctor's office that said, okay, we have your results back, and we would like for you to come in to discuss them, and we would like for you to bring somebody, so the details you're able to absorb with somebody there, and it's a little bit easier. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, when you hear that kind of thing, you know that it's not necessarily going to be the best news. Something's up. And I asked my mom to come with me, and of course she did. There was no question about that. We go to their office, and I feel like we're in and out within 20 minutes. And the conversation was the weirdest conversation I've probably ever had with anybody. And I think this past few months at this time was just a lot, And I'm sitting in the chair, and he's talking, and he has this folder, and he's reviewing all these details, and just talking and talking and talking. And my mom is sitting there and just frozen, just looking. And I cannot explain the feeling of him talking and me. The best thing I can put it to, like, I had no idea what he was saying. I couldn't even listen. I obviously heard what he said, but what he was saying wasn't registering. So he was done talking, and he said, do you have any questions? And my mom looks at me and waits for me to respond, and I said, about what? And it's like my body put up this defense mechanism and chose not to hear what he was saying, because I didn't want to listen to what he was saying. I didn't want to hear it. He repeated the whole thing, and this time, of course, I was able to grasp what he was saying. And he said, so your results came back. You have a nodule on the left side of your thyroid, and it is calcified, and after looking at the results, we're diagnosing you with papillary thyroid cancer, and the next steps are for you to have a needle biopsy, and then after that you're going to be having surgery. And he was saying all this stuff, and it's like there wasn't a minute for me to catch up to understand and to get what he was saying. And he was talking, and he was volunteering himself for the surgery, and after this whole experience with him, there was no way in hell I was letting him do the surgery on me. And we went into the needle biopsy, and that, oh my gosh. And so to explain, a needle biopsy is basically you have an ultrasound on your neck or wherever they're doing the biopsy on, and they find the area with ultrasound tool, and then they take a needle and try and pull samples to test in a lab. The best way I can describe the whole situation is I go to the hospital, I'm laying down, and they say, okay, we're gonna numb the area. So they spray my neck with some numbing cream, and I think they may have injected something into my neck, or maybe not, I don't think they did. So the only top area was numbed, and my mom was there, and she was watching the whole thing, and I can just imagine how she felt watching me go through this. But they decided that they wanted to cover my face, so they covered my face with a little sterile blue towel, and they started the procedure, and they said, so we're gonna have to go in 4 times to get a sample. We need 4 different samples. And I said, okay. And I asked them, if is this gonna, hurt? And they're like, well, it's not gonna be comfortable, it's a needle. And I cannot explain the amount of pain that I experienced during that procedure that wasn't meant to hurt that bad. It's like pressing on an area, it's like someone pressing on your neck, and while they're pressing, you're not allowed to move, you're not allowed to swallow your saliva. I had a towel over my head. It's a small room, there's a lot of people in there, I'm already thinking, oh my god, I have cancer, and I'm doing this tests, and they're pushing on my neck with the ultrasound. Then they take a needle and go through my neck into my thyroid, and they try and start pulling samples. But when something's calcified, it's hard. So basically, the best way I can describe it is them trying to scrape a rock with a needle. So they're trying to do it, and they're pushing and pushing and pushing. So the calcified nodule feels like it's moving. So, and I feel like, maybe I'm imagining this, but I feel like I could hear the noise of them scraping, and it was the worst experience I've ever had. It was absolutely terrible. I'm not one to get flustered or cry or get upset about things like this, but during that time I felt claustrophobic with the towel over my head. I felt like a science experiment. I felt like just something in a lab that they were just running a test on. I didn't feel like a human being. I didn't feel like, it just felt like a mess, and they were trying to get samples, and because it was so calcified, they couldn't get the samples that they needed with the 4 times, so they had to go in 6 times. But during this time, I had to tell them, as they're going in to scrape, I said, stop, everybody just stop. And I had a moment where I just was panicking. I was like, I cannot do this, this is too much. And I had to take a moment to breathe, and I said, this is gonna be over soon. I had to pep talk myself, as I do sometimes, and I was like, this is gonna be over soon. And thankfully I had my mom there to help me through it, and they took the samples that they needed. And after that, I wasn't able to speak for a few days because that whole area by my vocal cords was swollen. So I took the day off of work that day, and so I texted them, I had a procedure, I've lost my voice, I'm fine, just a little bit sore and swollen, but I'm gonna come into work. And when I came into work and tried to talk to them, this is how I was talking. I couldn't raise my voice, I couldn't talk in a normal tone. I don't even know if you guys could hear what I was just saying, but I wasn't even intentionally whispering. I could not speak. And they sent me home. They're like, you need to go home and rest. And so of course I went home, and rested, and we, had to wait. We waited for the results to come back in, and it was confirmed once again that I did have cancer. And at that point, it was a matter of, picking a surgeon. What are we going to do? What are the next steps? And at this point, I decided that I'm not going to focus on what was going on. I'm going to focus on one thing at a time. We are so fortunate to have a family friend who worked as a surgical tech for the surgeon that we picked, and this surgeon is amazing. I cannot, it's like a complete 180 from the first surgeon or doctor that we met to this guy, Dr. Bimston. He was great, and he really understood, and he really got it, and he really made me feel comfortable. And he's very educated. He teaches the surgery. He was the head of the department. I cannot thank him enough for how he was and being so kind. He got it, and he understood how to talk with my mom and explain things. But during this time, for us, once we picked the surgeon, the next thing was deciding whether or not we were going to tell my family, because at this time everyone was still dealing with how to handle everything that was going on with my grandfather. So for me, I didn't want to be the center of attention. I didn't want the focus to be on me. I wanted the focus to be on my grandfather. I also didn't want to scare my family, because we just went through this with my cousin. Obviously it's not the same, but we just went through a young woman in our family having cancer, and we already were dealing with my grandfather having cancer. I didn't want them to feel like she's next, and I didn't want to feel like that. I didn't want to be in that headspace. So we decided that I wanted to take 2 weeks to decide whether or not I was going to tell my family. And I also wanted to have a surgery date to make that decision, so I can let them know, this is what's going on. And we called a family meeting with my immediate family, and my aunt and her kids, and she's like my second mom. And I told everybody at the same time, and everybody of course had questions, and we just tried to reassure them that this is something that I need to do, and it's unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. Yes, I have cancer, but it's not going to be something that's going to define the rest of my life in many instances. Yes, it's going to prevent me from doing certain things at certain times, because maybe I need to have a doctor's appointment or something, but it's not the kind of cancer that's going to require me to go and have chemo or anything like that at that time. And I'm fortunate for that, very fortunate. And I'm fortunate for the support of my family, my extended family. They're just, once again, words cannot express how grateful I am and fortunate to have the support system that I do, because I don't think that I could be sitting here talking about this, or be sitting here, period, without their support. I don't know if I could do this by myself, and I would never want anybody or have to do this by myself. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. I wouldn't wish this situation upon anybody to begin with, but having to do this by yourself would be unbearable, especially with what was going on at the time. It was just a very, very difficult time for everybody. And so this is October. We told everybody in October, and my surgery was scheduled for January. So the next couple months I was kind of preparing myself for the surgery, and but also just focusing on my grandfather, because at this point it had been a month since he was diagnosed, and we were told that he was terminally ill, and he had 3 months, so we only had a little bit of time left. I mean, it was a short amount of time to begin with, but we only had a little bit of time, so we focused all of our energy on him. But there was moments where having to go through that and, work through the emotions that were involved with being around my grandfather, and knowing that, at any point that could be it, and having to think, okay, I have to have surgery, and I have cancer too, and we don't know what's going to happen after that. It was a lot to deal with, and there was moments where I didn't know if I was going to get through it. There was moments where I felt hopeless. I felt like everything's crashing down at the same time. And I didn't know what to do. And I don't want anybody else to feel like that. I don't want anybody else to feel like, oh, this is the end of the world. I mean, when you are diagnosed with thyroid cancer, they tell you, oh, if you could have any cancer, this would be the best one to get. Well, I don't want any of them, so thanks, but okay. That's what they say, and I guess I'm fortunate for that situation, but of course I would rather this not happen, but I wouldn't want this to happen to somebody else. And I'm glad that in my situation, my case, I caught it early, but I didn't know about this before. I didn't know this was a possibility. I didn't know any of this stuff before. And I wish I did. I wish I was educated. I wish I knew that this was a possibility. I wish I knew what to look out for. I wish, there's a lot of stuff that I could wish for, but there's nothing I can change. So I'm just grateful that we found it early and that I was able to push for what I needed and advocate for myself to be able to find it early, because there's a lot of people that are not that lucky. It takes time until they see a huge mass and then they know. And at that point, it's not that it's too late, but it's later than you could have gotten it sooner if you knew more about the disease or if you knew more about cancer. And this type of cancer, when you have thyroid cancer and your thyroid is not working properly, there's two different kinds. It's hypo and hyper thyroidism, which means it's either overactive or underactive. There's different symptoms that you can look out for each one, which I'll put, on the screen here, but there's different symptoms that you could look out for each one. And for me, I didn't realize that me being tired all the time was a symptom. I just thought I was tired all the time and I was not hungry all the time, because I just don't eat that much. But your thyroid regulates so much, and one thing that it regulates is your metabolism, and that's a huge thing. And that's why some people, they may overeat or they may undereat. And in my case, I didn't know that I was undereating, but maybe I was. I just was never really hungry, but I was always tired. And when I say always tired, became known as the family member that would just leave the party or whatever we were doing, the family game night, and just go to sleep because I was so tired. Or I started to always fall asleep during movies, fall asleep at work. I was falling asleep at meetings, and I didn't know why. I just thought I was so tired because I was going to school during this time. I was working full time and with all my grandfather's stuff, so I didn't know that this was a possibility. That's why that was happening to me. So I'm glad that despite not knowing the symptoms, I was able to catch it early because the mass was so small. But for the next couple months, we were by my grandfather's side every single day. There wasn't a day that we were not by his side. We were not there for him. We were not, doing what we could. And I don't know if another situation would have been easier, because it's never easy to lose somebody, but I think for us to have the privilege and the honor to be able to say goodbye, that's something that words cannot describe how grateful I am for that, because a lot of families don't get that, and my grandfather was like the glue that kept everybody together. So since his passing, it's been very difficult for everybody, for sure. But he was such an amazing person, and that's why it's been so difficult, because when someone's so great and you're not able to be around them anymore, or you're not able to be around them physically, because spiritually I still feel like he's around, but you're not able to be around them physically anymore, it's difficult. But I feel like we're lucky to have had such a great time in life with him, and he was in his 80s, so we had a lot of time with him, and I'm so grateful and thankful for that. In December, my grandfather passed, and that was of course a very difficult time for everybody. It was, as anybody could imagine, it was a very difficult time. And then in January, I had to have my surgery. So January 27th, I had my surgery. And it was I never had surgery before, so it was very weird and strange, and but the staff was amazing, the nurses were amazing, everybody was amazing. It was just I had a great experience, you know, the best experience you could have. And they removed we opted to have my entire thyroid removed just in case the cancer was to spread within the contained area of my thyroid. We decided to have the whole thing removed so I wouldn't have to go in for another surgery, or I wouldn't be expected to go in for another surgery. So that's what we decided. And I went in. My mom, my brother, my aunt, they were there. They were by my side the whole time. Of course not in the surgical room, but they were, you know, by my side the whole time. And I'm very fortunate for that. And this was the first time where I felt like, okay, maybe things will, you know, after this start to slow down, and we can, you know, find some normalcy and find whatever the new normal is, whatever it's going to be, we can find, you know, the new normal. So after this, the recovery time was very difficult. It was because I had my whole thyroid removed, my vocal cords, I believe in that area, it was, you know, swollen, and I, you know, had tape on my neck. And when you have surgery on your neck, imagine when you work out, you know, your neck, your shoulders, your back, your abs, those muscles, it's hard to move. It's hard to, any kind of short, simple movements that you do, it's so painful and it's so difficult. I mean, I couldn't even get out of bed by myself. I had to have my family help me get out of bed, and I couldn't sleep properly because I sleep on my stomach or on my side, and I had to sleep on my back. I had to sleep with, you know, multiple pillows under my head because I couldn't lay flat like I normally do. So it was, you know, very uncomfortable for a few weeks. The first week I couldn't really speak properly. I also was consuming liquids or very, very soft food like yogurt and stuff, and it was just a difficult recovery period. But even though the recovery period was difficult, after that I just felt like things are going to slow down, things are going to be normal, and that's what kept me pushing through and kept me, you know, healing. And when you're recovering from a thyroid surgery, there's stretches you have to do, and, you know, after the surgery I couldn't really lift my chin. Was a lot of the time I felt like I was sitting like this. I couldn't turn my head like this. I couldn't lift my head like that. So I had to, you know, do exercises after the surgery, and that was so uncomfortable and so painful. But I was able to, you know, with the help of my family, you know, work through that. And after that, you know, after the surgery, or since the surgery, I've been taking medication every day. And I take Synthroid, which is something that is very common, a lot of people take to compensate for the lack of a thyroid hormone. And for me, because I don't have a thyroid, I take Synthroid, you know, every day to compensate for the fact that I don't have a thyroid at all. And I work with an endocrinologist who is great, and she helps, an endocrinologist, in my case, helps me regulate my thyroid hormones. So I do blood tests and ultrasounds to make sure everything's okay, and I, you know, every couple months I do checkups and make sure everything's good. And the possibility of things not, of the results of any of my tests coming back every single time I take them is on the top of my mind. No matter if I say I'm not going to think about it, it's at the top of my mind. And during those times, it's such a stressful period, and there's also life stresses that naturally happen during those times. So, you know, it's a lot sometimes. and everything with the medication, everything, I was keeping up, taking my medication daily, and not, just trying to live a normal life, get back to normalcy. I got started back up at school, and everything, just finding my groove again. And one of the tests that I took, the blood test results came back abnormal. So, first thing I'm thinking, oh great, something's up, And this is, at this point, fast forward, this is during quarantine, this is during COVID. So I take a blood test, get the results back, and my endocrinologist's office calls me and said, okay, we need to set up a virtual appointment, over the phone appointment with you, about some blood test results. So it will be beneficial for you to have someone else on the phone with you so they can, make sure everything is clear and you understand everything. As I've experienced in the past, normally when someone says that, it's not the best thing. Something's obviously going on. And so I spoke to my endocrinologist, and she informed me that it is in fact that even though I had almost 2 years of remission and I met the 1 year mark, and that was, almost up to 2 years, I once again, although I don't have a thyroid, my cancer had spread to my lymph nodes. Hopefully, this will help somebody, at least one person, and I, thank you for listening. Thank you for anybody who's reached out to me during this time. If you have any questions, please drop them below. Please subscribe. I will be keeping up my journey and updating you guys on what's going on. If you have a similar story, please, share it below. Let's start a community. I've been contemplating whether or not I want to promote this video, but I've made the decision that I'm going to promote this video and run an ad because I want to reach as many people as I can, not for my own benefit really, but more so that I can help as many people as I can. And if you feel like this can help somebody, you see somebody who's falling asleep at family parties, share this with them. You never know what could help somebody, and I hope that at least I can help one person. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you would like to keep up with my journey, because I'll continue to post and share, please hit subscribe, set your alerts, follow me on Instagram at Liv Madison, and that's it. Until next time, thanks guys, bye.